All right, how should we open the show tonight?
I got nothing.
Nada.
Nada, the YouTube star?
Nada is Spanish for nothing.
I know that. It was a dad joke.
We've been over this. Leave the humor to me and Addison.
Fair. All right, let's brainstorm. No bad ideas.
A segment where you buy me a phone.
No.
We haven't done anything where I stuff gummy bears in my mouth in a while.
That was literally last episode.
We dress Wrigley in hats.
I ride Wrigley around the house like a horse.
Wrigley gives leadership advice.
All right, move away from the dog ideas.
You teach me to drive.
No.
You teach me how to drive.
Still no.
Mom teaches you how to drive.
What is that supposed to mean?
Mom says when you tell stories in the car, you don't pay attention and you drive 10 miles under the speed limit.
It's good to know, but at least my stories are legendary.
That's
one interpretation.
I regret teaching you all that phrase. All right, what's popular on YouTube, guys?
People showing you how to pack for vacation.
Watching people playing video games.
Watching people unpack on vacation.
People commenting about other people playing video games.
People making pancakes that look like celebrities.
Celebrities making pancakes that look like other people.
People unboxing things.
People smashing things that they unbox with a sledgehammer.
I love those.
So you're telling me a show about nothing is actually something?
Seinfeld did it for 9 seasons. Live from Studio A, somewhere inside the great state of Kansas, it's Leadership Late Night, brought to you by the Kansas Leadership Center. I'm DJ AJ, currently in negotiations for my own spin-off. Tonight's guest, Sarah Jane Crespo from Wichita Public Radio. Now, your host and the man who says no to all our great brainstorming ideas, DJ Whetter.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Leadership Late Night. DJ AJ, always good to have you, and always good to have your honesty. And speaking of honesty, I need to name that the Whetter Academy for one kindergartner and one third grader has fallen into utter disrepair at this point. Week 1 of quarantine, Lori and I had our stuff together. Check out this schedule we created for our kids. And by we, I mean Lori did it, and I love the idea. We're both working from home, and the kiddos got really into figuring out what time it was and checking off each activity each day. 5 weeks later, this is the schedule that came out of the administrator's office at Whetter Academy this week. Yeah, a little bit different. Folks, it's gotten so bad so quick at Whetter Academy, we actually got an email from one of our children's teachers making sure everything was okay because not much virtual schoolwork was being turned in. Let me say this, to all the teachers out there, I cannot do what you do. You all do amazing work, and I am so thankful my kids have you in their lives. You don't get paid enough, you don't get thanked enough, and I wish my kids were back in school with you right now. Until then, though, until the students can go back, please cut us non-teacher parents a little slack. Trying to educate our kids with no formal training while each working a full-time job and pretty much being in each other's presence 24/7 for more than a month, it's been tough. That's like making a teacher do their normal classroom work, but inside a bakery. And the expectation is they have to make and decorate a professional level wedding cake each day. Look, I can give you all the ingredients for the cakes, but the end product is probably going to be a little bit messy. And that's a pretty good metaphor for what's happening at Whetter Academy. It's a little messy. DJ AJ, you hit the beats, I'll hit the desk. Thank you, DJ AJ, as always, for those funky beats, and welcome back to the Leadership Late Night Desk, everyone. Nice to have the audience with us tonight. Very excited about our special guest, Sarah Jane Crespo from Wichita Public Radio. Stay tuned. In just 3-4 minutes, we'll get to that interview with her. We'll talk about journalism and communication in this time of COVID-19. And the realities are everything looks a little bit different right now. And it's just a fascinating conversation with Sarah about what it means to be somebody on the front lines of providing information at this time, and also what it means to be at home trying to be a journalist, trying to be a community engager in her role, and work through all those challenges amidst this pandemic. Excited about that. Before we get to that, though, let's get to this. You all, those of you who have been watching all along, know a little bit about my son Parker. You saw him there in the intro. He's gotten really into being a part of the show because he saw DJ AJ do it. And so early on, he wanted nothing to do with this, but he's all in now. And we had a great little conversation over toward the end of last week that I wanted to share with you. I actually got it recorded with my phone. So I bring you, without further ado, another episode of Leadership Lessons from a 6-year-old. Enjoy.
No. I don't care.
Leadership Lessons
From a 6-year-old.
sponsored by
Nobody.
Parker, did you eat chocolate-covered pretzels from the pantry?
No.
Don't lie to me.
I'm not.
How come you have chocolate all over your face?
That could be from anything.
This has been Leadership Lessons
From a 6-year-old.
sponsored by
Nobody.
You gotta love Parker David Whetter. Well, again, welcome back to the desk. And Ian points out we haven't seen much from DJ AJ tonight. I need to report the facts here. Right before the episode, DJ AJ had a little bike accident. She's doing fine, but you're not going to see her much at the DJ desk tonight. Only the pre-recorded stuff. She is doing just fine. But about 8:30, we had a little fun out there on the bike, and yeah, I'm feeling bad for her, but she's doing well. She's watching show with Mom upstairs, and she will be back. We're rearing to go next week. All right, time to get to our guest. Let me introduce her to you. We have Sarah Jane Crespo tonight. She's the Director of Community Engagement for Wichita Public Radio. That's KMUW. And our conversation gets into this idea of what it means to be a journalist right now, what it means to be a communicator, and what does it mean to be civically engaged? Because not only is Sarah the Director of Community Engagement for KMUW, she's also on the Civic Engagement Advisory Committee at the Kansas Leadership Center. We get into all sorts of conversations. I hope you really enjoy the interview as much as I enjoy talking to her. Take a look. All right, we're joined on the show tonight by Sarah Jane Crespo. And Sarah, thank you for taking some time out of your evening to join us here on The Late Show.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here.
We talked a little bit before we got going here, and the reality is this is just way different than anything we've ever experienced. And I wonder if you'd share to start out what the experience has been like for you personally and professionally.
It has, for me at least, turned into kind of a roller coaster of productivity where, I'm getting a lot done. This is fine. Everything, I can handle this. And then, why am I even here? It was just like this, from that, a feeling of empowerment to just almost an existential crisis of why even try? I mean, just highs and lows. And that is similar, I guess, in how I've dealt with it personally. Dealing, there are pleasures to working at home. There are certain things about it that are nice, but then you feel those feelings, and then in the next moment you become aware again of the number of people who are dying and dead, and the number of lives that are just devastated because of those deaths. And then so it's an emotional roller coaster as well as a productivity roller coaster.
KMUW is holding to purpose during the pandemic. Wichita Public Radio exists to inform the community about what matters. However, during this COVID-19 era, figuring out how to balance the heavy nature of the information has been a tricky balance.
As a person who works in a news organization, I believe in the value of journalism, but right now in such a devastating crisis, I think people need to be cognizant of their mental health first, and then to be like a citizen second. People really have to take care of themselves, or more things are going to on a societal level, more things are just going to suffer.
There are components of leadership baked into how we choose to engage in society right now. Every individual has to walk the line of managing self and energizing others. One way to explore opportunities to be civically engaged while at home may start with finding a wide variety of news sources to connect to.
Having a diverse diet of news sources is good for you, but then you also, I think, should know what your diet should mostly consist of. And I truly believe that for most people, that ought to be local, at least statewide, but mostly local news, because that's what's going on in your city government and in your neighborhoods, and whether or not people are getting tested for COVID-19 near you, and whether or not you could go get tested, or if there are antibody tests yet, and whether or not they work. Those questions that really affect your lives, that comes down to local news.
And locally for KMUW, listenership is up. And Crespo reports stay-at-home orders have changed everything about the habits of its public radio consumers. In her community engagement role with the station, Crespo is thinking beyond the radio relationship, searching for ways to unite community in this time of prescribed isolation.
For example, we're brainstorming now as ways for people to just reach out and have one-on-one connections with each other, and for us to almost broker those conversations and help people to just give them like the nudge they need or the kick they need to go out and have a good conversation with someone else. And it doesn't come back to the station at all. It's just a way for us to help our community. And so this, it is still part of our mission to serve the community. It's just in a way that we never envisioned before.
Purpose holds, but strategies change. A lesson KMUW and Crespo are taking to heart. So much so for Sarah that she also volunteers on the Community Engagement Advisory Committee at KLC. In that position, Crespo and other committee members are rethinking what it means to practice leadership in the civic arena.
I have felt like there is not a vocabulary for this crisis. We don't really have the words for to describe what we're going through and what we're feeling. And so all we do is like what I'm doing right now, fumbling around with some words, trying to get at how deep and devastating it is. I think the dangers of this isolation are profound, and they will be long-term. I actually kind of think culturally we will change because of all of this, and I do worry about what that will end up looking like. So fighting that is a big priority in my mind, and just creating ways for people to authentically interact with each other virtually.
In a world of COVID-19, I think the big question becomes, what can and does civic engagement even look like?
That is really the $1,000,000 question. I mean, it was almost hard. Yeah, it was hard to define it before. And so now it is just, I mean, it's whatever we can do, however we can do it. And obviously it's just 99% online at this point. But I think utilizing all of the different online tools that exist is going to be a key to it. Doing this face-to-face Zoom thing is maybe the biggest one, but then also dipping back into social media. Before this happened, I was trying to like get away from social media. It wasn't, the best way to interact with other people. Facebook, things like that can give you an impression of other people's lives that just sort of throws yourself into feelings of inadequacy and like the psychological effects of social media. But now it's almost all you have.
Right. In some ways, technology was a luxury, that it was like, oh, I can show this fake life or all this. Well, now it's the only way in some cases to connect. So what are we learning about communication, and what is important about communication in this time as you see it from what you've experienced in your role?
I'm not sure if we're learning this exactly or yet, but it doesn't matter so much what your political opinions are, or whether or not you're a member of the NRA or whatever. The heart of the matter is not any of that stuff that we actually focus on almost completely when we communicate with people, at least online. And what matters is who you are as a human, and what you feel for your family, and those relationships. The fact that we are both human beings who have feelings and hopes, and seeing one another as people is what matters, and seeing one another as not all that different is what matters. And I hope that we could, as we get deeper into this crisis, that people will be able to kind of come together a little bit more, and to find common ground is really what I'm trying to get at. And that could almost ultimately be a cure for the divisions that have just been so extreme in the last few years, if we can start to relate to one another as people.
So you mentioned a project you're working on about stories of hope and progress, and it's actually something I'm passionate about on this show, trying to end every show with some stories of hope and progress, and we've been doing that through pictures and videos. I'm wondering what's giving you hope right now.
Some of the stories that I hope to share, a woman in Wichita who's making hundreds and hundreds of masks for people. That's a really nice one. And there was a couple who were going to take a trip to the beach, and then COVID-19 hit, and so they couldn't go. And their church community brought the beach to their front yard, and made their front yard into a beach. They're really sweet examples of people just being there for each other. So we just need to lean into all of those stories and share those with each other, and then do more of that, and we'll get through it.
The next right thing, absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on Leadership Late Night.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for having me.
A big thanks to Sarah for having that conversation with me, and just so much from that conversation sticks out. Back in my roots is a degree from the University of Kansas in journalism, and I spent the first 5 years out of college working in Lawrence, Kansas for Channel 6 News on the sports side, as well as the Lawrence Journal-World. And those roots of journalism are really coming back a little bit right now. Obviously, with this little experiment we're trying, but also just in thinking about how you communicate messages right now. And I want to echo something that Kevin Baumhoff posted on the chat. KMUW is Wichita Public Radio, just like we have public radio here in Kansas City, just like we have national public radio. And they survive thanks in part and almost in total on donations. It's public radio. And so as you think about that, as you think about how we digest news right now, and so often you hear complaints all across the spectrum about what national news sources look like. I don't agree with all that. I think you can take in lots of news sources and put together a pretty good idea of what's going on for yourself. It takes some critical thinking. But if you want to get down to the grassroots level, if you want to understand what's happening in your community, check out public radio. I'm a big fan. I'm a big believer. And you've got one heck of a radio station down there for those of you watching in Wichita and across the country. NPR and local public radio just doing great work during this time. Give me a few comments on the chat if you would. Let me know what you're hearing. We'll get to those in just a moment. I'll share with you what I saw pop up. But as always, I want to give a lot of credit to the Journal, the KLC Journal. New articles coming out every day in this COVID-19 era. Chris Green, his entire staff doing amazing work. And so don't be afraid, and please do stop by klcjournal.com. News story on Kansas food banks. And that map you see there is basically the 3 regions of where food donations go. So if you find yourself in the extreme northeast, there's one food bank. Pretty much all of South, Central, and Western Kansas is operated in one region, and then kind of Johnson County, Topeka, West and North is another. Just a fascinating story about how donations work during this time. So be sure to check out that story and others at klcjournal.com. Look, a few points that stuck out to me tonight. First of all, that Wichita Public Radio is actually working on ways to create one-on-one conversations for its citizens. You want to talk about a radio station that understands its purpose of engaging with community? It has nothing to do with being on air. They just believe in the power of relationship. And I thought that was a really neat experiment that Sarah and her team are trying to get off the ground. A comment that stuck out to me: there's not a vocabulary for this crisis. Very, very interesting. It's something actually that I think Kenny Wilk mentioned earlier this week from the University of Kansas Health System when he talked about this idea that the framework at KLC helps in so many situations, but when the time frame is sped up as it is during this crisis, what we really need is to just be able to diagnose quickly and then intervene. And he said the interventions aren't always skillful. And what we really need then is to manage self and manage each other's relationships and understand things might be different in this time. So I'm struck by that idea. There's not a vocabulary for this situation. I want to read a few comments from you all tonight that we can check out over here in the chat. One comes in from Ian Brown. Change is scary, but I'm hopeful that there will be many good changes, such as outreach and engagement with more people due to forced usage of new-to-you technology, people being able to handle boredom and isolation better, and increased appreciation for the time you have with your family and friends, to name a few things. And Ian mentioned earlier, this divide between working at home, spending more time with family feels so good, and yet the reality that Sarah mentioned of this crisis, that we're losing more and more humans around the world and more Americans every day, and that's so hard to fathom. So this weird time of being able to dial into our roots at home, but also understanding there's something else going on. And I think that wrestling with both those things is very tough in this time. Jeff Mendel weighs in from San Francisco, where it's 82 degrees. It was 74 here today, Jeff, so we're not hurting too bad in the Kansas City area, but I would take the ocean at this point, I'm not going to lie. Jeff says, what sticks out? Sarah outing herself, saying she is fumbling around sometimes, not knowing what to do or say, but staying in the game nonetheless. Came across as very authentic and not just staying busy. Really well said, Jeff, and I think that's another theme that if you've been following along on these episodes is playing out a little bit. This idea that it's okay to say, I don't know. And that actually, from our authority figures, let me suggest something crazy, a few more I don't knows and we don't know whens may have gotten us a lot further in this crisis than give us 4 weeks, let me extend it, give us another 2 weeks. Look, I can stick with it. I see that nobody knows these things, but I think what we demand out of our authority figures is knowing. All right, and we can blame, we can have individual interpretations about what's going on here with some of our authority figures, and I have my frustrations, as you know, if you watched on Tuesday. However, our part of the mess is, what do we expect from our elected officials? Do we expect them to always say, I have the answers? And I think that
may be the case sometimes. Amy weighing in saying one potential downside of having to rely more on electronic communication is a great digital divide based on generation, income, and or living location, urban/rural. Absolutely true. Amy, one of the first things our district did here, and we're technically a rural district, I'm west of Kansas City and east of Lawrence, out in the DeSoto School District, and they sent out a technology survey to find out who had what technology and how. And many of the major school districts in this area suspended grades and said you could improve your grade, but your grade cannot get worse because they know there is not equal access to technology, right? So we can talk all day about providing learning moving on, and I joked about it in the opening, but if you don't have access to that technology to begin with, there's a big divide there. And it's really going to be a matter of another one of those purposes this country or this state or local governments may need to take on to say, are we okay with a lot of the divides that still exist in this country? The healthcare divide, the education divide, the technology divide, the wealth gap. We could name all these divides, and all this urgency of this pandemic is doing is bringing those to bear, right? It's bringing them to the forefront. We can ignore them when we go back to life as usual, whatever that looks like post-COVID-19, whether it's 6 months from now or 2 years from now, or we can learn from them and get better. And that's the hope I hear Ian talking about and so many of you talking about tonight. And the real reality is we don't know. It may be very easy for us to default back to our ways once this all comes to an end. Well, it's about time to wrap up this show, and Kevin Baumhoff weighing in. And by the way, Kevin, welcome back home. Kevin able to travel back home tonight, and we're excited to have him back in Wichita in a 14-day quarantine. The challenge ahead is not when, it is how we come back. Yeah, getting a lot of thumbs up on that one, Kevin. I think that's the exact right question is how will we come back? What will we choose to change? A comment on here, I think it was from Ian, was about we fear change. Ed O'Malley, our CEO, always likes to say, we say that we fear change. The reality is we fear loss, right? If I gave you $1 million tonight, my guess is those of you out there watching right now, you'd accept that $1 million. That'd be a big change in your life, but the perception is it'd be a good change, right? What we actually do is we put perceived loss on a situation, and we think that because of what we perceived as loss, that the change will be bad. And so a lot of what you're doing when you're practicing leadership as a person who's trying to move a group forward is disappointing them at a rate they can tolerate, saying, those things you perceive, journey with me and let's find out if they're true. And if they are true, let's speak to that loss. So we might play with that idea that it's not change that we fear, it's the perceived loss. And we can actually study and know that perceived loss is just as powerful as if we ever lose anything or not. If we believe we'll lose something, even if we don't, we will change our habits because of that or adjust because of that. And that might tell you a lot about our current political system, by the way. All right. That will do it for tonight. It is time to get DJ AJ to bed. And she is doing well and excited to be with us. And we taped this little segment before the bike accident. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Please join us on the after party. Julian, thanks as always for being our tech guy. Go ahead and post that link to Zoom. We'd love to have a bunch of you on the after party to talk about all we heard from Sarah, this idea of loss. We haven't played with that much in our time together. And I hope that we can get together and really have a nice conversation. So bring your beverages, bring about 15, 20, 30 minutes of your time, and we'll see you on the after party on Zoom. Until then, your moments of hope, and DJ AJ, go to bed.
Good night, Dad. I'm going to bed. But you should go check out Dad's after party. And now, moments of hope.